I'm back today to finally see warm season grass in the summertime. Every time that I've been down in Georgia, it's been in the off season when the grass has been dormant or pretty much dormant. So the first thing that I noticed about this Tiff Tuff is that this is my kind of grass right here. It has a beautiful green color to it, a lot closer to ryegrass in terms of texture too than I really anticipated. So I think for someone up north, if you happen to be moving down south at some point, or if you're just down south and you want something that looks maybe a little closer to ryegrass, sort of what I'm doing at home, this stuff right here is beautiful stuff. And the good part about it too is that you could put ryegrass over top of it as you get into your off season. So, and now that I see this in prime time, beautiful, beautiful grass. Now this Bermuda and Zoysia has a much finer texture to it. It does have definitely kind of a tough texture to it. It's a small leaf though, so I still like the look of it. It's not quite as dark green as that Tiff Tuff. Another grass that would be a good option for a really nice real cut look. So now we get to the El Toro. This one I would say out of the three is my least favorite in terms of my personal preference on the way that it looks. And it's much wider blade look, and I believe Lee said that this one is a lot easier to maintain in terms of someone who doesn't want to go to so much maintenance in their yard. They still want something that they could reel mow and that's gonna look nice in their yard with a little less maintenance. So out of the three, definitely Tiff Tuff is my favorite, then the Xeon, and then the El Toro. So I'm back here at Reel Rollers with Lee today, and thankfully we're about the same height. So, you know, every time I try to film something, usually the person is 6'3", but we're like exactly,
perfect.
Yeah.
Eyeballing each other.
Today we just wanted to recap a little bit about what's gone on since the last time I was here, some of these turf quadrants that we did, what have been the results of some of that. Obviously I wasn't here during that time frame when you saw the green up. Since I was here last time, what was the green up process like and kind of the testing we did?
Yeah, no, well, it's been 90 days. So you were here around March 15th, and here we sit in the middle tail end of June. And it was really interesting when we broke each of these three plots into 4 quadrants. As a recap, we took one quadrant and did nothing with it. We took another quadrant and we burned that grass when it was dormant.
Yep.
We scalped one quadrant, and then we dethatched and scalped one quadrant. And you know, the biggest impact that we saw was actually during that green up. How fast did it come out of dormancy for both the Xeon, the El Toro Zoysia, as well as the Tiff Tuff Bermuda. The grass that came out of the dormancy the fastest was that we scalped. The grass that we actually burned, we didn't really get a true deep burn when we did it. I believe we just, you know, kind of singed the top of the grass. We didn't really get down to the soil level, so I don't think we created that much burn. Yeah. And the quadrant that we actually dethatched and scalped actually was the slowest whenever you do any type of intervention on your grass mechanically. And maybe even chemically for that matter, depending on what it is. But mechanically, the grass needs to recover. Right. So whether you're dethatching or verticutting and you're doing something like grass, which ultimately is great for the lawn, there is a phase, I believe, you know, a week to 3 week period where it's got to recover from it.
Yeah, different than what I do for a lot of different things, just because the seasons, like you said, summertime, when I'm kind of in that period of don't do a whole lot of stressful things to the lawn, right now is when you want to be doing those things to your warm season grass. Lee and I did a soil test when I was here as well, and we kind of were able to look at that and get some sort of a game plan on what he should be applying. Pretty much what we found was that he needed all the macronutrients, he needed pretty much everything. This is a native soil that was brought in here, but there was also some base that was here before.
Sure.
And so that's one of the things that we noticed over on the El Toro as well, is that maybe it has a little more of that gravel type base that was here before, and it's not looking quite as green as some of the other things. That's just kind of our hypothesis that we've been thinking about there, like what could be going on with it that's a little different than these other plots. But he's been applying using his local site one here to get some advice too, which, you know, it's something you can always do, is go to your local places that know your area really well and know the types of products that are going to work for you. And so that's what he's been doing, applying. He did a little bit of equalizer too, and after we get the sand leveling done, he'll be doing another application to kind of get things to bounce back a little bit. But, you know, that soil test is going to give you a direction as to where you can go in the future, a roadmap so that you know what to apply and how to kind of take care of your grass the best way possible. So today we are going to start the process of the sand leveling, and we're just going to do some aeration today, and then we'll get to the rest of that coming up. It's getting to the hottest part of the day, so we don't want to die out here. But I'm actually feeling the breeze today. It's not bad.
No, it's not bad at all.
For my first time in Georgia in the summer, I'm feeling pretty good about it. So one of the things with the sand leveling as well that Lee was talking about to me was that, you know, over time he'd like to kind of match this grass with the edge of the border. And so that's one of the other things that you're going to start to do is get some of these low spots to be leveled out with all that other stuff. That'll help with just making it look a little better, easier to mow so you don't hit into anything like that. So a few of the reasons why we're going to be doing sand leveling, or especially on a real mowed yard that's cut tight, why sand works so well is that it levels so well. There's a lot of different talk about using a mixture. Should you put something else into the sand? Preferably, I like to just use straight sand for this process. You know what you're getting out of it, you know how the material is going to work, and you're really essentially capping the top of this soil. So what that does is allows the root system of the grass to really move into there because there's so much space in between those particles compared to a really heavy, dense soil. And then also, it's going to allow you to really do a great job of leveling compared to using like a native soil it's going to move around again. And not to say that sand will never move around, but it does sort of fall into those low spots. The more rain and irrigation that you get, it starts to move itself naturally into the low areas, especially for real mowing. If you want to go down tight, it's a lot better experience when you have a nice, flat, and even lawn.
One of the things we want to do first is make sure we mark the sprinkler heads. We caught them off guard a little bit. Just want to make sure we don't run them over with the aerator.
Really, this machine is honestly not that difficult to run. It's kind of more about just picking it up at the end of each turn, moving the machine, which is kind of heavy, but otherwise this one actually runs really well. So a couple times at home I've actually used the scarifier that goes into this to pick up cores. It works pretty well because you set it high to where it's not digging into the ground too much. It just kind of spins on there, and if you have the basket on the front, then it picks it up and does all the work for you. So today we are going to actually try the rotary brush in here and just see how that does, kind of comparing to a scarifier tool, just for fun. There we go.
Grass catcher on. Let's let it go. I think you did a good job, but I think we should drop it down to a quarter because we know the bristles aren't going to damage the grass at all. Right. So we're going to go ahead, that was at a 1/2 inch when we cut the grass at. We're going to drop it down to a 1/4 inch, run a path right beside it, and let's compare the two.
So this here is another situation of using any tools possible you can to make the job a little easier. Like I said, I've done this with my scarifier before, and that works pretty well. This brush does a great job too without being quite as aggressive as the scarifier is, but like I said, you set the scarifier so that it's just kind of barely touching the surface of the grass. It acts more as a comb at that point. Picking up these cores just because we want to put that sand down into the holes. You could leave these here and break them down if you are not doing sand leveling. I just prefer to remove these so that you can change the actual composition as much as possible. Get that sand down into the holes and not put this soil back down in there. So you really want to take out a lot of cores if you can, especially when you're going to be putting down this sand and you're going to be actually trying to change the composition of putting sand down into those holes so that all those roots can grow into there. Put a lot of holes in here when you're aerating. It's going to be awesome for it. Many people don't think about sand is that it's just a lot easier to manage things. Now, you're going to have to apply things more often because fertilizers go through them more quickly, but drainage is better. So if you're dealing with a heavy soil like this is as the native soil, then anytime you get rain, a bunch of rain in a row or something like that, then you're going to have a difficult time drying this out. Sand gives you a lot more control over your fertilizers, how you can use quick release products more often but at lower rates, and then also you're going to get better drainage out of it so you can control that water and have things dry out more when you need them to. So back for day 2 at Real Rollers today. We're going to get the sand down, see how it goes in some of these deeper spots. Want to make sure that you're still not going to smother it with inches and inches of sand, or you're going to have some issues with that. Bermuda is probably a little bit more forgiving in terms of smothering everything. In general, it's best to not go like 3 inches of sand in a spot and think that everything's going to come back through that. The other thing to mention today would be the sand. I know everyone always has questions on what sand can I use, what sand should I not use. So if you have a USGA spec sand that's near you, it's probably going to cost quite a bit of money, but it's going to have the right particle sizes in there. It's to a specific specification that they use on golf courses. So that would be the best option if you could find something like that. If you do find a sand that's close to that, or it's going to be something more like a mason sand, that's what I've used at my house, then the main thing would be using that same source over and over again, because if you go to a different source, it might have some more fines in it, it might have different particle size. The main thing would be whatever you find. If you can find a mason sand, or like I said, you can find a USGA sand, that would be best. But if you use a mason, try to find a source where you're going to be able to continue to get this if possible, and you're going to be able to use that same sand over time. So what's going to happen after this process is you need to do sanding once a year, and that's not really just for leveling purposes, but it's to continue to make sure you don't have a buildup of organic matter that grows into that sand, and you're going to have a spongy layer. It starts to cause some issues. So when you do that, you need to make sure that you understand this is going to be a yearly type thing that you need to do. So aeration and more top dressing of the sand in the future is going to be the program that you're going to need. So next time that you do aeration, you don't really want to leave those cores on there. You want to take them off again, put more sand down so that that sand layer is always the top layer going forward. So we got some teamwork going on now. We're definitely getting a lot done with multiple people out here helping. So what we did over here first was we put down the sand with that machine. The top dressing machine, it works great actually. Give a nice even layer over everything. You don't have to do it all by hand. And then the next thing we did was you're letting this dry out a little bit, and then Lee went over it with the Swordman with the rotary brush. Now that's going to help to brush things in. You can do this with a regular broom if you have one, but let the sand dry out a little, because as it's wet, it's hard to push it around, and it's not going to work itself down into those areas quite as well. Now after that, as well as it's dried out, we've gone over it with the leveling rake. That's going to just kind of help to move it into the lower spots as much as possible. You have that wider piece of material. If you have a drag or something that's even bigger, you can use that if you'd like to, but the leveling rake for most homeowners is a good size that you can still use by hand, and it's not too hard to move or anything like that. And so now it's not going to be absolutely perfect in one try by any means, especially if you have new sod. It's kind of wavy like this was. They did their best job of laying it down smoothly, but there's always going to be some humps and bumps and things. But make sure you don't bury it too much to where there's no grass blades left, because you need those grass blades coming out of there so the sun can hit them, it can grow again. And Lee will be putting on some fertilizer as well to make sure that this pushes some growth again and comes out of that sand. But you can see across here, we're going to work this in yet a little bit more than we have. But also, once you put the water on this and you get a good rainstorm and all the sand starts to move down into that canopy, it's going to be a lot easier to come out with a broom too and hit any areas that aren't showing as much grass as you would like. The water though is really going to be the key factor in the sand sort of moving and settling in the low spots and moving off of the high spots as you get good rainfall and irrigation on it. So this is 6,000 square feet that we covered with, Lee had 9 tons of sand. We had just a little bit left, so he saved that, and he's going to be able to, find any low spots in the future as this grows back in and just kind of hand fix some of those. This is a process though that's going to make real mowing, especially because you're cutting so short, a lot more enjoyable. It's going to also change the look of everything so that it looks nice and flat and even over time. Got some water going down on this and some fertilizer. Lee put on So that's gonna help to jumpstart things again, get that grass growing back up through the sand. You're gonna wanna let this grow out now a little bit more. He cut it down to a 1/2 inch. It took me last time about 8 days. I let mine grow up so that I could cut it again around 3/4 of an inch and I wouldn't be digging my reel into too much sand. One thing I did wanna mention though too is if you're going back to the reel mowing after this, you're probably likely going to get some sand in that reel. So probably don't use a brand new sharpened one unless you wanna get it dull right away. But one thing that you can do after you mow this and you get some sand on it, especially if you're in warm season country here and it's the prime season in the middle of the summer, you could do a backlapping on your reel after you do first probably 2 or 3 mows with the sand, and after it's pretty much gone, you're not going to be noticing your reel getting dull after that. A backlapping would be good to do if you have a relief grind. Now Andrew here at Reel Rollers has done some videos on that if you have one of these homeowner type mowers, so you want to check those out if you want to understand what backlapping is, but it's essentially kind of an in-between sharpening. It will get you back to cutting really well until you probably do your next sharpening. So for something like a Swordman, you can send in your reel, maybe you have an extra one. So I wanted to make sure to mention that as well because people often ask, well, how soon can I reel mow this again? So you want to let it grow a little taller, then you can reel mow, but I just wouldn't put a brand new reel on there because it's probably going to get a little dull. I want to thank you guys so much for watching this video, and we'll see you next time.